Hello, my WGU friends. It's Justin here, coming to you with a new video. Even though, I've completed my WGU programs, I still think it would be useful to create videos for those who are still in school, trying to navigate the academic journey, trying to get tips here and there on how to make the process easier for themselves and just enjoy the process of being a student. So there was a question at one point by a viewer who asked, what is it like to have 3 masters? Because it definitely isn't the most common situation to hold that many masters. And it made me think, from whose point of view? What is it like from my point of view as a question, or what is it like to employers who are interacting with me or other people in general? So I thought I'd just make this video to talk about that and give you some perspective on my interpretation of what it's like. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned. So I never intended to do 3 master's degrees. That was never an aim of mine, though it just so happened that when I did the bachelor's degree, I really enjoyed learning. And I think that, post-secondary and higher education gets a bad rep these days, obviously because it's quite expensive, it's very time-consuming, and a lot of people would argue that degrees aren't necessary for many jobs. However, I do think that there is so much to be learned when you are a student. Even just the whole nature of trying to organize your life, trying to learn new material and kind of activate those parts of your mind that have never been activated. So as I did more school, I just, in a way, became more interested in doing more school. And I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. And I didn't want to be a grade school teacher, so I ended up doing a specialized degree in my kind of area of expertise, and that was a 2-year program. And it was at a brick and mortar, it wasn't online, and it wasn't through WGU. It was in the creative fields, so I had to do studio courses where I actually did a lot of project-based learning, and I did a 1-year thesis that was literally every part of a research project, from the initial proposal all the way through kind of doing secondary research to doing primary research, which meant my own research. Now that was so rigorous for me at the time that it was a huge accomplishment. And the feeling of doing that process and having that accomplishment felt very rewarding. So that for me, my point of view of having that degree was a major milestone in my life. And when people would ask me, about my credentials, or anytime I had to put my credentials on a resume, I felt extremely proud of that. And essentially, it allowed me to teach in university. Without that credential, I had no option to teach because it was a terminal master's degree. So I had the option of teaching in a post-secondary. So of course, it felt rewarding and it was worth it. Now, shortly after that, I started to realize that when you are an instructor in a post-secondary institution, that there isn't a lot of training around pedagogy, which means like the art of teaching and learning. And a lot of people are really good at what they know. So, if there's a professor that's in the anthropology field or the business administrative field, they're very good at that and an expert at that. But what happens when education becomes less known, or certain practices or best practices around how to deliver instruction and design curriculum? So eventually I decided to go back to school, and that's where I stumbled into WGU. And it was just through happenstance that I came to WGU, especially because I am a Canadian and they rarely accept Canadians, so I was very lucky. And I ended up doing an education degree. So it was a Master's of Science in Curriculum and Instruction. And I did that with the intent to accelerate it due to kind of limited funds and limited time that I wanted to spend on that degree. Now, for me, it was still very useful to have that degree because I ended up applying to another job, and they actually looked at my credentials within the field of education rather than my other credentials because I was more in a education realm. And so they didn't know of WGU, so I actually showed them a qualification assessment that I had through my province that indicated that the degree I had from WGU was acceptable within Canada, and it actually helped me get the job. So to me, it was very rewarding to have that degree because I knew it could also help me get work, but I also enjoyed the process of learning at my own pace. So then fast forward a couple of years and I ended up doing the third program, which was at WGU in the Masters of Education in Learning and Technology. And that one I did in an even faster period of time, which you can see my most recent videos documenting that process. I find that having that degree really kind of gave me a well-rounded perspective of the education field. And I can kind of see that because I learned so many different topics within education. So from curriculum development to evaluation to looking at how to assess student learning, and then looking at instructional design and how to evaluate the instruction, and then technology in the classroom to differentiate instruction. Like, I learned so many different things by doing both of those education degrees. So from my point of view, what is it like to have the 3 degrees? Well, it feels like I'm very well-rounded in what I aim to do in my career, because I have my topic-specific degree where it helps me teach within a certain field, and then I have my education degrees, which actually helps me become a better instructor, kind of really anchoring and grounding what I do in certain theory and best practices. Now, I would have thought it would have been more impressive to myself that I have all these degrees. However, the truth is, the way the mind works is, we set a goal for ourselves, and when we reach that goal, we kind of set a new goal or a new goal post. So for me, it never felt like miraculous that I have all these degrees. It just felt like I had set goals and completed them. Now, I guess the question is, what is it like to have 3 degrees from the perspective of interacting with others? So people in my life who hear I have degrees, like many different degrees, a lot of the times they are definitely kind of impressed by that, but they are kind of confused by that. So I've had even close friends ask me why? Why do I have so many degrees? They feel like it's a little excessive. They feel like it's a little bit unnecessary. I even was with a group of family members, and they kind of made a joke about Justin having a bazillion degrees and just adding to his bank of degrees. And I get that, because again, it's not very common, but I don't think the average person is necessarily a true lifelong learner where they really thrive and love learning to the same degree that I do, where I actually feel energized by learning new things. For me, because I've grown to really enjoy formal education and become good at doing formal education, such as academic papers, and now I would say I'm much better at doing objective assessments or tests, I think it's a great context for me to learn. But not everyone gets good at that. Not everyone does as much school where they start to feel really confident and competent at doing formal education. For me, it's important to try to articulate why I might want to do these degrees if I'm being kind of inundated with these perspectives of others. But at the same time, I also don't feel like I have to overly explain myself, because I'm doing it for myself primarily. But if I do feel like I need to explain it, I try to do it gently and just say that I'm a lifelong learner. I thrive off of learning, and I wanted to become an expert in my line of work, which is essentially in my topic-specific discipline, as well as teaching and learning. And when you work in higher education, it's very competitive, and having those credentials really allows for credibility. And I've said that in one way or another and never really got pushback, just kind of wow, good job. I'm glad that you are doing something you enjoy. I'm glad that you're pushing yourself to learn more. Now, from the employer perspective, more recently, I haven't really interacted with a lot of people who know that I have 3 degrees. I have got jobs from employers who know I had 2 degrees when I applied to my past jobs. I have a few colleagues who know I finished my most recent WGU program, and a lot of them are interested in the fact that I love learning. And so, even my direct boss, you could say, or my manager, she said, one of the main reasons that she hired me is because she felt like a good teacher or a good instructor really needs to be a good learner. And she felt like me pushing myself to be a good learner and to really put myself in the shoe of being a learner shows my dedication to that profession. And I also had another colleague who just recently I talked to, who's going back to graduate school. And I just said, if you ever want to talk about or brainstorm ideas on how to navigate the graduate school experience, because maybe they're new to it, so they want some insight, that they're more than welcome to reach out to me, because I've had quite a bit of experience. And then, they asked me about, what have you done? And then they were kind of wow, you've done a lot. And they were actually very interested in my research. So when you do graduate studies, a lot of times you do research on very specific areas. And I kind of outlined all 3 research areas, and then they said, oh, your research kind of all intertwines and it's all inextricably connected. Some of the topics overlapped in different ways, and they seemed very curious about that. Have I ever got kind of negative pushback from an employer? I don't think so. I don't think at this point I have, and maybe I will share that in the future if I run into that, whether that's like through LinkedIn or someone I'm working with, or through the grapevine of someone who I'm working with. I'll let you know how that goes. I suppose it's possible that I might be overeducated or overqualified for certain jobs, depending on the employer's point of view. As someone who's worked in the field of career development, I can say that at times employers do discriminate based on either lack of education or too much education, irrespective if that potential candidate is really skilled and qualified for that job. So that's something that I would have to be aware of. But I'm not uncomfortable by that. For example, if I wanted to go find a part-time job somewhere at, maybe let's just say a receptionist or something, I definitely wouldn't be putting all 3 of my masters on that. Or maybe I wouldn't put any of them on there. Or maybe I would only put like one of my credentials on there, if at all. So I think when we're targeting ourselves to an employer, we need to also be selective. It's the same reason why we wouldn't put all of our work experience on a resume, because a resume is a very targeted document and aim to not show a whole career history, but a snapshot of what's most relevant. So those are my thoughts around having 3 masters and other degrees as well. And I feel like I'm not the only one nowadays to have them, but it's less common. So if you have any questions about that, you're more than welcome to share below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you in another video.